Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We'll let everybody trickle in. How you doing, Della?
I'm good. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good. Thanks for being here with us. While we're giving folks a couple minutes to join us, we'd love to know where you all are coming from today. So if you could drop in chat where you are, we'd love to see it. Allen, Texas. We love y'all. Say hi to Chelsea for us.
I
Hey,
know, and
Greensboro.
I'm seeing where everybody's from.
I know. It's all in the chat. I'm in Durham, North Carolina, by the way. I see some North Carolina people already. Hello, everyone.
I'm California. I just don't know if I've seen any California yet.
They'll be joining, I think. We got quite some registrants from California. It's around 10 a.m. for you, right, Della?
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. exactly.
Nice. That's perfect webinar time. Oh, hey, Borna, how are you?
High fives from Houston. High five back.
Love it. DC, hey, everyone. Awesome. We'll give people just maybe another minute before we officially kick off. We have some Canadians, we have some UK. I love it. We're officially international, Della.
I know. I'm thrown off by what time it is. Okay, I'm gonna look that up right now. Maybe the UK person can put in what time they're, because that's really impressive. Not joined between the hours of 9 and 5.
I love it. Denmark, 7 p.m. Oh, yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
6 p.m. Okay, okay. Good job, guys. That's dedication right there.
I love it. And there we have a California person. We have Malibu now.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, it's officially 1:03 where I am in Durham, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Before we start, I just want to encourage you all to continue staying active in chat. We want this to be fun and interactive and conversational, so do send your thoughts, any questions in the Zoom chat. Our team is here today, so we have Andrea Conway and Sophie Zinn, as well as Emmett from the Go Vocal team, and they're going to help to answer your questions and comments in real time. Anything we don't get to, we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session, and then we can always forward your questions to Della as well. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself. My name is Sarah Horton, and I'm the Director of North America here at Go Vocal. For those of you who are new to us, we are a community engagement platform for local government. I said I'm based in Durham, North Carolina, but I grew up really close to where Della is in Benicia, California. So super excited to be with her here today. I worked in GovTech for the past 7 years, and my background is in voter engagement and civic engagement, and super happy to be with you all. Della, over to you. Can you introduce yourself as well as share with us your favorite part of your job?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Della. I work and live in the city of Benicia in California. It's about 20 miles-ish north of San Francisco. It's a very small town. It's like 30,000 people. This becomes relevant later as I explain our project. I am a management analyst and PIO for our fire department. And I think that my favorite part of my job is that I feel like I go home each day having done really good things and not for a profit margin. That's my favorite part of working in local government and working in a public entity, is that we're not working for profit margins, we're actually working to better the public, better public health, and improve people's living situations.
I love it. Thank you so much. So, Della and I are here today. We've been working together for the past several months on City of Benicia, specifically the fire department's engagement strategy. And we're here to share some best practices that we've learned along the way around navigating polarizing issues. Our plan for today is to take you all through a three-part playbook that we've created, and throughout, Della will share some of her personal learnings and experiences from her ongoing efforts in the City of Benicia. But before we get started, we want to know a little bit more about you all so we can tailor our conversation accordingly. Sophie, if you can put the poll up, we would love to know generally like what kind of role you work in, which one of these best represents you. So we have comms and engagement, planners. If we have any public safety folks, we'd love for you to say hey. And then if you're just a friend, other enthusiast, lover of community engagement, welcome to you as well. Give folks another 15 seconds or so. Awesome. Looks like we have quite a few folks from the comms and engagement field. So similar to you, Della, from the PIOs, welcome everyone. And some folks from public safety as well. Awesome. Great. Cool. Right. All right, and then final question from us before we officially get started. You all registered today, presumably because you are dealing with some contentious issues of your own or have dealt with polarizing issues in your community before. And we're nosy, so we want to know what are some issues that are polarizing your community right now? If you could share those in chat with us. This is a very relevant meme for Della because she's from the fire department.
Yeah, and this project is a little bit of fire, but that's okay. It's going really well. I was nervous about it at the beginning.
Homelessness for sure.
Confusion between regulatory and our agency, which is non-regulatory, that's really relevant to this conversation as well.
Yeah, super real. Election denial. Yep. I came from the election space. It's tough. We love our election workers though. Tourism, that's an interesting one.
Community violence.
Bike lanes. Pickleball too. That's a really contentious one. I don't know why.
Particularly, yeah. I hear pickleball is really big in Texas as well.
Texas people, you'll have to validate. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. We are seeing some common trends in here. Thank you all for being vulnerable. These are all really important community issues, and I can see in reading these why they might be polarizing. So really interesting. Oh my gosh, physical violence between pickleball and tennis. Yikes. That's a good one to end on. All right, awesome. Well, as we can see, there's no shortage of contentious issues. So we're excited to hear from you all today, as well as share some of our learnings so far with this playbook. So without further ado, Della, let's get into it. Part one of the playbook is all around laying the groundwork for effective community engagement. And the first thing that we encourage y'all to do is to really take time to understand the community context. So you all know this well. Each of your communities is super unique. When you're developing an engagement strategy, you want to consider decades, if not hundreds, of years of historical and political context. You all have unique community demographics and outcomes from communications and engagement strategies in the past, and whether those were handled successfully or unsuccessfully. So Della, you're currently engaging Benicia residents and other stakeholders on a very polarizing issue, which we'd love to learn more about. You're developing an industrial safety ordinance to regulate local refineries, which we'll refer to throughout this conversation as the ISO project. Can you share with us what factors you considered at the start of the project and what made it so controversial?
Sure. I think first it's important to give like a slight overview of exactly what the project is. So, an industrial safety ordinance, or at least the way that we are interpreting it or trying to make it happen, is going to be a city ordinance, which is a city law regulating industrial facilities within Benicia that fall within certain categories to make sure that they're safe, that they're more transparent, that the community gets more notifications about what's going on, and hopefully that overall the number of accident incidences reduces. Um, Now, so our community has a refinery in it. It's a major refinery, but really outside of that, our community is mostly suburban. It's about 30,000 people. We have a small downtown district, but it's only in our downtown, only small businesses are allowed. We don't allow chains. Benicia is a very, I don't want to say NIMBY community, but a little bit. It's not the vision of Benicia in our general plan was to encourage public health and also have a lot of sprawl between houses and have a very small town feel. Not have it feel like there's a lot of big box stores in town, have you know your neighbors, everybody takes care of everybody. Um, and so the refinery is kind of, and then so in addition to that, there's been a big history between Benicia residents and the refinery really being at odds. About 10 years ago, maybe 15 now, there was a crude by rail project proposed by our refinery, which would have, I know you guys have probably heard of other crude by rail projects. Um, they can be very much potentially dangerous for the immediate surrounding community and also expanded communities. At the beginning, our city, at the time, our city attorney had sided with approving the preliminary planning application for the crude by rail project. And after a lot of community feedback and community organizing, actually the city was successful. The residents, everyone was successful in voting against the crude by rail project, and it was not allowed. But that led to a lot of lack of trust between the community and the government that's really supposed to protect the public health and listen to them. Now, in addition, obviously, the refinery is a significant tax contributor to the city. I don't think that we'd be able to have the level of quality of life without it. But at the same time, there are potential safety issues that come about.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. What was my original question?
The question was around understanding the context, so that context is super helpful. But were there, I guess, beyond that, were there specific things that you were like, it's really important for us to consider this when we start, and some of the main reasons why it was controversial? So you kind of already started talking about the demographics of the city, some of like the previous communications engagement that maybe didn't go so well, that resulted in some eroded trust. But you also have shared with me in the past about some of the different opposing groups that make for
Yeah.
a really polarizing, issue.
So I think, yeah, exactly. So in addition, Benicia is an aging population. We have a significant population of seniors and also folks with young children. So a lot of these community members have organized into various community groups literally for the purpose of holding the refinery accountable, holding various stationary sources within the rest of the industrial park accountable. And so we've got that going. But, as in all of your communities, you have various groups happening. You've got your Chamber of Commerce or something similar. We are international, so I don't know what you guys call it. but we have a Chamber of Commerce that represents all of the businesses. We have a Benicia Industrial Park Association that was actually formed so that the community group, like kind of as an opposition to the community group of residents who are really focused on public health. Um, we just have a really varied amount of community groups, and everybody has a really big opinion on this, and it's all different, which I know is really similar to probably most of your communities. Um, with polarizing issues, everybody has an opinion and maybe doesn't fully understand the total background on it, but they still have a really strong opinion. And generally, you got two different groups or maybe multiple, even more than that. Um, and it can get tricky.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So move us along to kind of our next step now that we have that context and that background. The next step that we went through together was to define the project objectives. And so, of course, you and I both love a SMART goal. We wanted to find a goal that was specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And also, you were given kind of a set of objectives by your city council. So it'd be really interesting for you to share the council's objectives and ultimately how you took that and defined your goal for this specific engagement project.
Sure. So, in our city council has 5 members. And so, in order to pass anything, you need 3 of them to vote yes. Two of our council members brought forward a 2-step direction, which essentially means that they're directing staff to do something. The first step is to have staff research the topic, come up with some recommendations, and then the second step is for staff to bring that back to council, and then for council to vote on the direction to move forward with. So at the end of the 2-step process that was brought forward by our 2 council members, Carrie Birdseye and Terry Scott, the direction was to create an industrial safety ordinance that reduces the accidental release of hazardous chemicals, improves accident prevention through community and industry participation, improves local air monitoring, and improves community transparency. So that was their, overarching goal. And then within that, they decided that there would be 4 pillars or several pillars that we really needed to meet. A big concern, and what has actually happened multiple times in our community, is that the refinery or another industrial source has released a hazardous chemical into the air that really has negatively affected public health, and it's caused shelter in place. We've had to close down an elementary school that's right next to the industrial park. We've had to have people on lockdown on warnings. We've had to send out emergency messaging around it. It's really been a problem. So a huge thing is having air monitoring that is monitored in real time and that the fire department gets notification on as soon as the refinery or another industrial source gets that information. So ensure that, but air monitors don't just come out of thin air, you also have to be able to fund it. And so having some sort of funding source that is not put on this, where the cost isn't put on the residents, but the cost is instead put on these industrial stationary sources. A stationary source is like the people who would, the industries who would be regulated by this industrial safety ordinance.
Mhm.
And then also have some independent oversight. The community member political group really wants a council, a commission, some sort of advisory body to be formed that needs to be brought in to advise on incidents, to advise on plans, to advise on prevention, on all of these regulated facilities. We needed to define the regulated facilities. We needed to come up with some way to enforce all of these rules that the industrial safety ordinance would make. And so in order to measure all of these things, we really focused on community engagement. Because we're rebuilding trust with the community from this severe lack of trust. Also, it's not just lack of trust on this issue. I think we're all feeling this. Since COVID, the lack of public trust has skyrocketed. The public does not believe, and I think it's also with social media. I think it's just with our day and age right now. Obviously, we're going into presidential elections. That always negatively affects public trust. But there's just kind of this feeling in general of people thinking that government is against them, of this real lack of trust in government protecting and doing the right thing. And so, in order to A, build public trust, but B, also, we authentically wanted to create an industrial safety ordinance that was informed by the public. We didn't want our public engagement process to just be a checkbox. We actually want to use that information, let that kind of guide what aspects we focus on in the ordinance, while also maintaining good governance. And so, we an online website, an online platform, and community and in-person meetings. We reached out to social media. Our city manager has a newsletter. And then also, because our council members were so involved in this, and they're all, half of them are coming up for reelection this November. And so they're going to a lot of community events. They're bringing this project up. They're inviting people to be engaged. And then the nice thing about the online website is that we are able to have this back and forth dialogue in many ways across the website. And I don't know, Sarah, if this is a good time to get into the
It's actually a perfect segue to our next part, which is how to set these building blocks for a constructive conversation. So, Della, you kind of already started talking about creating an inclusive engagement strategy, like through these various touch points and meeting residents where they are, also putting something online, but also removing barriers to participation, which we'll talk about a little bit further. So, kind of just in the context of this playbook, when we start by understanding context and like really laying the groundwork for effective engagement, the next stage, once you've identified who you want to engage and what the deliverable should be, is to design your engagement strategy. And we have a lot of engagement folks in the audience. I think you all know that effective engagement should really be inclusive, authentic, like Della said, not just checking a box, as well as transparent. So removing any barriers as possible to create that broad engagement and create that space. So Della, tell us a little bit more about that. You have some key components for your engagement strategy. One of them was your Go Vocal engagement platform to kind of bring that context, the background, educating on the issue. And you did some in-person and virtual meetings as well, right?
Yeah. And I think going back, and this is becoming more relevant just as our entire country's population is aging. I know we're international, don't actually know the stats on world population, but our entire country's population is aging. And so many of us are plugged in, like so many of us communication people are plugged into social media 24/7. We need to be monitoring our social media. We need to be monitoring our online engagement all of the time. But actually taking a step back and remembering you're missing a huge amount of your engaged population by only engaging online. And to invite them in, what I made sure to do was in every single post, in every single message that went out, it said at the bottom, if you have questions, if you want to talk about this, here's my direct phone number. And I just put my direct phone number at the bottom. Um, you know, seniors are really, really comfortable with speaking on the phone. I aren't, but it's a really important engagement tool. Inviting them to a physical place to come meet and speak with you in person was huge. And so in our in-person meeting that we hosted, not only did I want to engage people who have a harder time engaging online, so maybe seniors, maybe people with different abilities, but also introverts. Introverts don't like speaking up in a in-person public meeting. So how can we make it productive and also hear from folks who aren't as loud as our normal folks? Because the other thing is, my darling public engagement people, we know that we have some loud ducks. We got some loud folks who we hear from repetitively. It seems like they're at every single public meeting. It seems like those are the people that invariably we make public policy based on their opinions because they're the only ones that we hear. So we really wanted to not have that be the case. We wanted to have a representative sampling. We wanted to bring in more voices, more diverse voices. And also in your polarizing topics and in ours, a big issue is that we our people who are really engaged in this polarizing topic have been in it for a long time, generally speaking. They know a lot about it. They are part of a political group. We wanted not just those people, but we also wanted the average resident. We wanted the parent who doesn't have childcare, who can't go attend every single 7 p.m. city council meeting that's right in the middle of dinner and bedtime. We wanted the college students who don't have time in between classes and their part-time job and all these different things to be able to engage. And so bringing everybody in, and especially bringing in people who are new to this topic, because with your polarizing issues and with our polarizing issues, you get people who take that issue and they make it almost their whole personality. Um, and that's just not a representative sampling of your entire population.
Mhm.
So
Can you
in the
talk a little bit
website,
about, oh, I was just going to say, can you talk a little bit about the specific ways that you brought new folks into the conversation, if it was surveys or forums or, directly commenting on the plan? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really complicated, polarizing issue. People don't really understand what an industrial safety ordinance is, and it makes them want to stand back and not jump in and not engage. They're like, I don't know anything about that. I don't have any opinions about that. It's like, no, actually, this does directly affect your health, the health of your children living in this town, um, aging parents, all these things. And so starting every single method of outreach with, here's what this is. Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about public health. We're talking about, hey, remember, a few months ago we had that hydrogen sulfide um, leak and it smelled like rotten eggs in our community for 3 days. Remember that? That's what we're talking about. Giving people an example that they can feel connected to the issue with, and also that makes it feel relevant to them. And then the other piece is that in previous outreach in different public outreach things, we put out a public engagement website, but a big problem was barrier to entry. Folks get really overwhelmed once they have to make a password and they have to go do all these different things. They have to do Google Authenticator or whatever. And that was really forming that we had gotten a lot of feedback previously that was a significant barrier to entry and made people beyond that even feel like, well, you don't want my input on this because you would make it easier if you actually wanted my input. You only want the input of the people who don't think like me.
Mm.
Um, the trust that every single little thing you do can erode public trust, even when to you you're like, well, I didn't even think about that. And so we purposefully allowed anonymous posting on this on our public website because we wanted people to feel like they could engage without having to put their name to it if they really didn't want to. Um, and they just had to verify their email because at the same time, we didn't want, uh, you know, our regulated facilities to spam the comment section with, we don't want an ISO, or vice versa, either side. We wanted authentic input, but we did want to allow anonymous posts. People feel like they could come in and join the conversation.
Mm. Super valid. So you balance that need for kind of data integrity and making sure that you weren't being spammed or it wasn't bots, but you still lowered the barrier to participation as much as possible by allowing people to post anonymously. You also did a great job at responding to comments. That was something that you did really actively throughout. And I noticed that really facilitated some of this open conversation. You had folks who were commenting on stuff in a really constructive, helpful way based on you providing extra context. So you kind of were able to bring the two or multiple sides together in a very nuanced way.
And respond to your comments,
Yeah, for sure.
the helpful ones and the not helpful ones. Well, that being
Okay.
said, thank you for your suggestion. I really did. We really, a huge goal of ours was to be very mindful and not just have a thanks for your comment or a like. It was actually, okay, yes, we will incorporate this. Oh, did you think about this aspect? Well, actually, this is already like referenced in another part of this of the ordinance. Here's where that section is, those type of things.
Awesome. All right. And then the last final point of the second part is to co-design solutions with key stakeholders and experts. So you mentioned, the work that you did to widen the range of participants and really bring in broad participation into the project. But you also did a great job at going deeper with stakeholder committees, expert groups, and being really transparent about those more private, I guess, engagement touch points. So, can you share a little bit more about that process?
Sure. At the very beginning, once we got this step staff direction to go forth and create this draft ordinance, we're a fire department. We like we do respond to hazard events, but I'm not an EPA regulatory agency top person. And this level of project really does require a much higher level of knowledge than I bring to the table. Um, Obviously, we have the community background, but we needed some more academia to be involved at the very least, and certainly other government regulatory agencies. I know in the chat beforehand, a lot of folks had shared that there was some barrier to them being able to complete their projects based on other government agencies already have jurisdiction over it. This is true in this case. The background of this is that a different had already created an industrial safety ordinance in a different county in California. So well done and did actually reduce accidents and hazardous materials incidents to the point that the state adopted it as state law. It's active. Our Benicia refinery is under that. Our Solano County Coupa. It says my connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So our Solano County regulatory agency already regulates the refinery and does a lot of what our council members were hoping to have done with this industrial safety ordinance. And so at that point, it kind of becomes this legal ping pong of, well, can we also have the same law at a local level that we already have at a state and regional level? Can we both enforce it? Is this allowed? And then in addition, we already have the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We have an air district that regulates air quality, is supposed to be enforcing, fining, communicating with the residents about these things. The problem is that none of it, because it's so high level, the local government and the local community isn't actually getting that communication in real time and at the level that they expect. And so we were potentially going to be stepping on toes of Solano County, of the state, of the air district, of the EPA. We have the State Environmental Protection Agency already happening. We have a lot of agencies already existing to regulate exactly what our goal was in the industrial safety ordinance. And so it's talking to them directly. And so that's exactly what we did. We set up weekly meetings with each of these agencies. And myself and my fire chief and like the ISO subcommittee, including our two council members that were working on this. And each week we met and we asked these questions. The Air Quality Management District, can we like co-regulate what you already regulate? Can we fine for the same things that you fine for? Double checking with our legal. They had to double check with their legal. There's a lot of background that happened outside of necessarily the community public engagement space, this is still public engagement, reaching out to subject matter experts. Um, but it's just, it gets so complicated, and that back and forth ping pong match is not relevant to the community. They really want to just know the outcome of, can you do this?
Mhm.
Um, and in addition, there were a lot of community groups that we met with, including the school district. We have an elementary school literally right next door to Valero Refinery. They have been affected. They have had to shelter in place. They have had to send kids home from school due to air quality issues, whatever has happened refinery. And so making sure to bring in every single level. And then on top of that, it's not just the school district that's nervous, it's the parents. Imagine that you're a parent of your first grader. You just dropped them off for the first day of school at this brand new school that they've never gone to. And you, as a parent, get a phone call at 12 p.m. You're not supposed to pick them up till 2. You get a phone call at 12 p.m. Hey, come get your kid. There's this potential major emergency that's happening. And you're like, I am now nervous to drop my kid off to school every day. And so, speaking with each level of these community groups, not just the ones that are formed for this project, but everybody who's going to be affected. We have, public senior housing in the area, speaking with them, ensuring that we bring everybody to the table who's going to be affected by this ordinance or a lack thereof.
Mm. Awesome. All right. So that brings us to our third and final part of the playbook, which we've called final yet fundamental points. We kind of already started touching on this, Stella, but the next thing here, once you've concluded your engagement, public engagement efforts, is to collect and analyze data. And arguably, when you are engaging on a polarizing issue, it's even more important to have that reliable data to be able to point back to and reference when a decision's been made. So can you share, you are a multi-hyphenate, as so many public servants are. You're a management analyst slash fire PIO. So that management analyst side of you is really interested in collecting data and analyzing it and all of the data dashboards and stuff. Can you expand on what type of data you were looking to collect and how you ended up collecting all of that?
Absolutely. So, you mentioned I'm a multi-hyphenate. I think that many people in local government and certainly communications folks, we wear a lot of hats. Like, yes, we like numbers, but also my multi-hyphenate, my other piece is numbers and budget. But we do wear a lot of, and making sure that the data collection is as easy on us as possible, because my PIO job is like 20% of my job. I I don't have time to be going and doing all this stuff. And so we created a survey. We did a huge public survey push to have as many like varied individuals take the survey as possible. And one of the questions that we included and what was really relevant for us was, do you like, what's your level of experience in industrial safety? Do you currently work for an industrial safety or an industrial facility? Or have you been a part of this action for a long time, maybe on a political side, like a community action political side? Are you a subject matter expert, or are you like just a resident who's interested in this topic? And we actually got 40% of our survey takers had no experience at all in industrial regulation. And that's excellent, because that was really what we were looking for, was this varied sample um, to make sure that our survey results were accurate. And so when you bring forward your survey results of, so 40% of people have no idea what an industrial safety ordinance is, but still like 80% of those people, 80% of the people who took the survey think that an industrial safety ordinance in Benicia would be relevant and helpful. They think that by the end of the survey, and the survey kind of teaches you throughout like what it is. And that was intentional. We intentionally built that of first, what's your demographics? And then here's kind of the context. And then like, what do you think about it? Um, and that way, when we bring those statistics to city council, they can't just say, well, the only people who took that survey were the active community political members. It's like, no, this was, I mean, it wasn't a perfect sample size, because you're never going to get that, because trying to get everyone to engage all the time, like we only have a 50% voter rate. Anyway, I digress. but getting everybody, being able to prove to council our survey results are pretty representative of our actual population was huge. So we did this through survey, like the number of people who took the survey, what the survey results were. The public engagement website captures everybody who verifies an email in order to engage on the website, and we were able to do that. And then we actually did finally create this draft ordinance document, and we put it on the website for people to comment on. They can see everybody can see what each person's question was, and then what my response back has been. I'm still in the middle of it. If you actually visit our Engage website, I have a few questions that aren't answered because it only finished on Saturday. But then in addition, from these larger groups, we got giant comment letters. We got, some of them were like 30-page, very clearly threatening litigation over this. And we could post that online and show, and just to let residents know, like, hey, our timeline might be adjusted just based on this is happening, FYI. And so having all of the data, and then also having how many people came to the community meeting, how many people are actually engaging in the comments section, all of that was really relevant and helpful.
Mm. So it sounds like you had a mix of quantitative data through surveys and other engagement, as well as a lot more qualitative stuff through the open comments and the contextual feedback on the draft ordinance itself, right?
Exactly. So we wanted quantitative data because that's always important for your staff report. When you're coming in and you're bringing that first reading of the ordinance to justify with 30% of people thought this and 78% of people thought this. But at the same time, we actually wanted the context of why do you want this? Like, what are you thinking? What are the thought processes? What are you nervous about? And that's all qualitative data that we could then digest and actually allow to shape the ordinance.
I want to quickly pause and ask some questions that are coming in chat. So Wolfgang asked how you designed a survey that was educational in nature and if you have any resources. And then we have one from Priya about asking if you were successful with engaging youth and young adults.
So designing a survey that's educational in nature is actually very tricky because you don't want to affect or sway your survey answers by educating on what the topic is. And so what we did, I drafted the survey, and here's the other piece of it. At each step of the process, because this is led by our elected officials, their hopes and designs for this outreach process, I also really had to take that into account. And so when you're trying to weigh what you would do versus what an elected would do versus what's going to not sway the public, while educate them, it can get really complicated. What I actually did, and what I think a lot of us community engagement folks do, bring it to somebody who's not in government. Bring your draft survey to a lot of somebody's who are not in government. Have them take the survey and then give you feedback. Ask them questions. I think this question might be slightly leading. We revised a lot of our questions from the first draft because we didn't want it to seem like it was going to sway the public, while also letting them know an industrial safety ordinance does these things. But like, do you add the historical context? Is that going to unfairly sway? We didn't want the regulated facilities to come to the city council meeting where the ordinance was being passed and where we're saying these statistics, these survey statistics, and say that was an unfair survey. Bringing it to non-government people and then also your fellow community engagement folks who aren't working on the project. So most of us have other like people in maybe neighboring agencies, maybe different departments within your own agency who haven't worked on the project. Have them take the survey and get their feedback. It's so valuable. I got a lot of really good feedback to make it more clear, make each like possible answer choice mirror each other, have it like negative to positive on each one, and then use less words in everything. That's always a good thing to get from feedback. And then as far as engaging with the 30 and unders, Because we had a lot of online engagement, we actually did get some younger adults. The problem is that Benicia just doesn't have that many. Um, we're not a college town, and we're also in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I know that there's some, just from seeing where some folks are, uh, our median house price is such that most under 30s cannot afford to live here. But a lot still do, because us boomers, or no, us millennials, is that what I am? Yeah, us millennials come back and we live with our parents. And so um, we do have some of those. We have a lot of under 30s who actually still live in the same household with their parents and house share. And we did get a pretty good sample size of them because we had so much online engagement. And while we didn't only focus on social media, we made sure to share on social media, share the stories, make reels about it, um, keep it engaging for the Instagram population.
I love it. We have some great questions coming in to the Q&A as well as in chat around the kind of structuring outreach for culturally diverse communities and stuff. I want to get to that probably in the Q&A section. So Della and I have one final point, and we want to hear kind of finally from you if you thought this public engagement was successful. So let's go there first, and then keep sending your questions in chat, and we'll ask those in just a couple minutes. So just to wrap this up, we're already kind of starting to talk about building that transparency, building that trust. One thing that Della did super well was being intentional about community trust building throughout the process. We talked already about balancing easy access, ease of use with the verification process to maintain data integrity. You also did a great job at publishing which subject matter expert groups you were engaging. You gave people the opportunity to recommend others. So you heard from a really diverse set of interest groups. And then you also did a really great job at publishing survey results, being really open with everything that you heard. All of that said, I want to bring us to the last point, which is the goal of any engagement effort around a polarizing topic, which is to focus on a community-driven outcome. So the ideal goal for all of us in our work is an outcome that reflects the community's input and also helps continue to build that collaboration between residents, stakeholders, and local government. So Della, a final question for me of today is, you're wrapping up this project soon. I think the draft ordinance is being read to council next week or very soon. Would you say that this public engagement effort was successful, and why or why not?
I think the public engagement process was totally successful. We did a really good job and effective in rebuilding public trust, especially from a community group that, through the crude by rail problem a few years, like 10 years ago, had completely eroded trust in city government. Um, do we have an industrial safety ordinance signed, sealed, and dusted today? No, we don't. Do we have a really solid draft that we've gotten a lot of excellent public input on? Yes. Was it informed by public input? Was it really informed by what the community wants to focus on? Which really, at the end of the day, is much more communication and less incidents overall. Absolutely. At the same time, with a polarizing issue in particular, because the two sides of opinions are so polar opposite and there's almost no overlap, it can be tempting to try to make an ordinance that meets them in the middle.
Mm.
The problem is you're going to have an ineffective ordinance. It's not, if you just try to take half of what this side says, half of what this side says, and try to meet in the middle, it's not going to do anything. You're not going to do any good, and it's not going to be effective, and it's also not going to be good governance. What you have to do is determine, is there a need? What is that need? Um, do we need to make it? How do we need to make it? And what do we need it to do at the end of the day? Um, And so instead of finding the middle point between our two really polarized parties, we actually did a third thing, which was, what do we need to see in order for the industrial park to be more safe and be a better neighbor to our community? We as a fire department will respond. How do we make it so we respond less? How do we make it so that we are talking to our community more? How are we making it so that our community receives more information about what's going on, and that the incidents are of a lower degree, or at a less of lower number of incidents? Um, it's really important in a polarizing issue not to try to just compromise or make everybody happy, because you're going to have some ineffective governance in that case. It's
Mm.
got to be, what does the community need, and how do we get there? And actually, we just had a meeting on this past Monday with our community group that is like the political activists for the community public health in this case. And they were thrilled. They were happy. They thought that we had done a great job with building public trust. Um, we were only at the point right now where we've just gotten the comments in and we're actively evaluating them, but we haven't, shown what our second draft is going to be on this. And so, but for them to not even to still feel heard when they've just given us our comments and we've said, okay, thanks, we're going to evaluate these, um, is incredible. And really to have a room that didn't feel, at the very beginning of this process, we met with all the stakeholders, right? So we met with the industrial park folks, and we also met with the community folks. And each room felt so tense. It felt so on edge. It was like people knew that they needed to be defensive coming in because the government hadn't taken care of what they needed to take care of in the past.
Mm.
And so coming into the room on Monday and just having a really like good, clean energy of, we know it's going to take some extra time, but we know we're going to get there. And we also know that this ordinance is going to do good work. Even though we didn't satisfy what either people really, like 100% of what either side wanted. Um, that's excellent. So I'm feeling really positive about it.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Mm.
Thank you, Della. That was super fun and I hope really insightful for you all. We've both learned a lot throughout this process and we're happy to share with you. So we have about 8 minutes left. I'll go to the next slide so you all can screenshot this. We'll also share it out afterwards. This is the steps of our playbook today, but I'm going to go to some questions. One of them, Della, or a couple of them are around engaging diverse communities. So culturally diverse communities, fostering maybe intergenerational dialogue if you had different age populations, as well as making sure that technical information was accessible for diverse communities. Can you speak a little bit to that? How you brought in other groups?
Absolutely. Yeah. The San Francisco Bay Area is generally a very diverse place. Benicia specifically, honestly, not so much. And so in terms of various languages spoken, various cultures represented. And so um, this is a huge like topic in community engagement, is making sure that we keep everything translated and that we make it relevant for various communities. In Benicia, I think we have like a 98 or 99% English, primarily English speaking population. It's pretty not diverse. Um, and so we've just done the evaluations on that. We didn't translate anything because we've found that actually it makes it more confusing with the way that social media translate works, because we don't have populations that need stuff or we don't have a significant enough population that needs items translated. And so if this is your community and you need languages translated, make sure you post them in various languages, and your graphics need to be in various languages and all of the different things. But as far as it, like, kind of making sure that intergenerational communities were able to talk with each other about this, we were really intentional about this. In our community meetings on this topic, what I did to make sure that introverts were included and also to make sure that people could talk to different people, that they weren't expecting to talk to that day. I broke everybody up into groups and I put whiteboards all throughout the room. There were 6 different whiteboards with different topics. Everybody got a pad of sticky notes and a pen, and they were to go up to that board and ask questions, write down comments. But what I did was, instead of allowing everybody to just like break off into their own groups of 6, I randomly assorted everyone. And so they were talking to people who don't live in their neighborhood. They were talking to people who aren't in their family. They did not get grouped with their husband or wife or whoever they were sitting with. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that your teacher did when you were growing up in elementary school to group everyone off was really relevant here, because it ensured that nobody was with who they essentially showed up to this event with. And it was a beautiful time, because there were people who were really educated in this topic, who've lived in Benicia for 40 years, paired with a young mom who just moved here with her family last year, and they were able to talk about the issue. The person who's been really engaged on this taught the person about like all the history, and then the young mom said, I think that's all really interesting, but like, here's really what I need. I need to feel safe sending my kid to this school. Um, and so it allowed everybody to share different perspectives. And what really was important was that it didn't just repeat a public comment city council session where each person comes up individually to essentially yell at the city council. Instead, it fostered dialogue, it fostered engagement, and it also made sure that everybody could talk to somebody new.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Go vocal team. Is there anything else we should answer? Ask Stella. No? Okay, well, if there are additional questions, we'll forward those over to Della and we'll respond to you via email. Thank you all so much for coming. We would love to hear your feedback. Do engage with us after this session and keep us posted if you do adopt this playbook for any of your contentious issues. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Stella.